All right. Back on a Friday.
Back on the Friday. Yeah, what is it? What's the kids say? Friday? We haven't done a Friday cast in a while. It is September 12th. The year, it's still 2025. Welcome aboard, everybody. You're listening to the Crushing Iron Podcast. This is episode 876.
I was wondering if you didn't get that because
did I nail it? I know we didn't do like our usual 7-second pre-show meeting, which is basically just you laughing at me try to guess what number that we're actually on. Is that right? 876?
Yeah, but I could feel it coming. Today. You're gonna say it, and I'm like, he doesn't know. I bet he's gonna go, oh shit, I didn't ask.
I got it today, man. Yeah, I got it today. It's Friday, feeling good. Beautiful day here. A little bit warmer, but you know what? We'll take it because it's been a pretty cool summer. But yeah, happy to be here. Happy to come back this week for our second podcast, and how we obviously did the one on Tuesday, fresh off Ironman Wisconsin 70.3 weekend. Again, one of our biggest weekends of the year. Got a lot of great feedback from that. A lot of good, a lot of questions from that too. And people, I think a few comments, people appreciating the, how you should, approach your races and disconnect. And I think we didn't give this any real attention, but I think it should be noted. And as there's a ton of special shout outs we could give for all the insane, really, when you think about the course, like the insane amount of PRs that our squad had at that race. I think most athletes that are listening to this should listen to this and then actually ask themselves, like, how much would I have to be paid to do this? And the pay to do this is Mark Phillips, one of our longtime C26 athletes, a Wisconsin native, went watchless from start to finish. So no watch in the swim, no watch on the bike, no watch on the run. And to clarify, that also means no bike computer. So he was completely blind from the time he got in the water till he crossed the finish line. This is how old school he went. In his email recap to me, he was talking about the level of the sun in the sky. He was like, I recognized on the second lap that where the sun was placed in the sky that I had a chance to hit X time. And I'm like, okay, that's
oh, he was sundialing it?
Oh, he was sundialing it, baby. He was going old school. And he PR'd his swim, PR'd his bike, PR'd his run for an overall PR of his Ironman. Watchless. I mean, well, first off, it didn't surprise me for on him because that's just who he is. Obviously a lot of people couldn't do that. I don't even know that I'd have the stones do that. I've done some blind races before, but to be that in tune and to trust yourself that much, I just, if you're listening, ask yourself, do I have the pair or the set to go after something like that? And if I don't, one, what's holding you back? Because we've all, for a long time, we've always told athletes, do a 5K, do a 10K, do a half marathon, right? Do a sprint, do an Olympic, do a watchless. And just because most people hold themselves back, the numbers that we see get in our head. And we mentioned that, a lot, even just on ridiculous stuff. You go out for a run and you kind of run through on a paved trail with a lot of tree coverage over it. And that your watch pace is slow, even though you're moving fast, but it gets in your head. Right, or your heart rate, strap is off, but I think it's remarkable in this day and age that someone does that, right? So kudos to him, but just how freeing it must have been, and how present you had to be in the moments. And he kind of walked through in his email of I took in a little bit more here, took more here, I was just listening to my body, how much more in tune, we are. It's like going to the library, right, to focus on your project for 8 hours. Or it's like going to a coffee shop inside of a mall, right? You're going to have distraction after distraction after distraction. You can't focus. And sometimes I feel like that is the, the more inputs we have, really distracts us in the air. And we talk about it almost in a roundabout way before the podcast. Everything we add tends to sometimes get in the way of us understanding what we really need. So I wanted to mention that because I think it's like a marvel in this day and age with how much tech and stuff and people go to, and how, like, when do you drink, or how much do you take, or how much do you took, or what power, or what heart rate, or what speed, on everything. But you can still do it. And the guy went sub 12, had an amazing day, and he's still not done yet. But I think implore everyone to find some race at some point in some time over the next few months, whether it's, start small if you need to, right? If you're one of those people who can't do a workout, or if you forget your watch when you go to the pool, you just don't do it because you can't record it, do that. And, yeah, I mean, I think people would be surprised. It's a great way to unlock the door. But yeah, I mean, it's, I forgot to mention that, but I mean, I could see you doing something like that. But not many people, I don't think, could go that long, but go watchless. But man, like what freedom that must feel like.
Yeah. Well, when I started I was going with a chrono watch.
Yeah.
That was all I used to race with. And, I love hearing stories like that because obviously, he's talking about gauging the sun, and I mean, it's like really getting in tune with your sort of primal instincts, and there's a lot of power in that. I think we get, like you said, man, you get updates and notices and all these kind of things going on, and it's just like such a weird little distraction. It's almost like it cues a memory that you don't want to think about or whatever. And when I was thinking about on the swim, I kind of did the same thing with regard to the sun, but I thought it was like noon by the time I got done with that swim. But yeah, it was weird because even yesterday I just went out on I was like, I just feel like doing a little kayak right now, and I got out there and didn't have my watch on. Man, it's unbelievable how that that to me is a sign that that's not a good thing, when you feel like you can't even go kayaking because you forgot your watch. And I was just sitting in the kayak going, should I record that? And I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing? And then I went out and, I saw like a neighbor on a boat or something. I was just kind of hanging out by there, and I could feel
the urge.
Well, the urge I could feel the clock ticking. You know what I mean? It's just sort of ingrained in your head, I think, sometimes. It's like you just can't stop and enjoy life anymore. You just got to keep rolling. And I think that should almost be reserved for one day, as basically a race, or
Yeah, it is, because I mean, even just like the psychology behind having to log. Like, why do you have to log it? Well, but you got to go back but I would venture to say like 99 out of 100 triathletes don't even know how to really truly analyze it, because comparing it to another run isn't analyzing it. That's just comparing one run to another, right? You compare trends, and like it's a really interesting, like we I've been reading up on, there's like a new, and this is like obviously extra tech on the tech side, which is away from what we're talking about. I'm going to reel it back in, but it's basically like measuring your respiratory rate is a lot better than, how you're gauging a lot of RP and things like that, because RPE changes, right? Your RPE on a 10 one day might be a different 10 on another day based on what your baseline was. So even RPE scales, right, are different, right? Because you might wake up feeling super refreshed with no stress, and your 10 is going to be higher because you've got your ceiling is going to be higher because of how you feel. But if you woke up and you could rate something as a 5, but you wake up the next day and your ceiling for your 10 is much lower, and you still rate it as a 5, but the stress could be different. But anyway, it was just talking about like, going up mountains and coming down mountains and doing run workouts and bike workouts, measuring just like, the amount of, your chest coming up and down, and like measuring that. And that we've always talked about, like nasal breathing is like, to me, is like almost the perfect like device to go off of in your training. Is like, can you do the majority of your workout in and out of your nose, right? If you're doing aerobic. And I have some people like, I've never breathed out of my nose. I'm like, well, I don't know how that works, but like there's little things like that I think we get so disconnected from, that are honestly really like some of the truest ways, because they aren't. You can't say, oh, I'm not sure this breathing was correct. Like, my lungs weren't calibrated today, or my lungs, and the battery, I think the battery's dying. So, like my breathing was off. or, like my smart trainer crashed and Zwift crashed. And so I just think I can't do it. Like if you're going off like these simple like measurements at your body, are you heating up quick? How is your respiratory rate? Are you having like nice deep breaths, or is it a shallow breath? Can you breathing in and out your nose the whole time? Or are you breathing in your nose and out your mouth? I mean, honestly, like I'm fairly certain most athletes could train off of a 3-zone model. Zone 1 being in the nose, out the nose. Zone 2 being in the nose, out the mouth. And then zone 3 being in the mouth, out the mouth. Like, I really do think a lot of athletes could train really, really well going by that, right? Like zone 1, zone 2, high zone 2 would be in and out through the nose. Zone 3 to early zone 4 would be like a big breath in, but you got to exhale through your mouth. And anything above that, like high intensity, would be just, you're breathing in and out of your mouth. Mm-hmm. And that's obviously going to change like the pace and heart rate. But I just think there's so many of those things that we tend to forget, because now what happens is like, and this is, I think, how far away we really are getting from understanding ourselves and what we really need and what feels best for us, is because now we have to, like some of the big focus on like the tech side that they're trying to deliver to coaches and writing, articles about, is like how to triangulate all these metrics that you get from all these devices everyone wears. Right. And you're like, well, wait a minute, like what, that you're just adding an extra step of confusion, an extra metric for calculation to then get incorrect. Because like to me, like and I know a lot of athletes might disagree, and even some coaches might disagree, but to me, the more inputs you have, the higher likelihood of not getting the output correct. Right? The margin for error is huge, because the more data points you put in, right, then the more you have to get wrong. And so then there's more effort on, hey, how do we triangulate RPE and actual feedback and heart rate and power and pace and all, and the stress and the load and the strain, like, well, yeah, but I mean, if you keep it pretty simple on that, it's like, how did you feel? I think it went great. Or what felt great? This felt great. And you see a smiley face, and then that's it. Like, I just think that there is, it like the tech side on what you can buy and what you can add is a lot like what Training Peaks has done over the last 8 to 10 years. They continuously add charts or remove access to certain things and bells and whistles to make you feel like you have to have them, to make you feel like you have to need them. And if you don't, then you're missing out on this like unknown performance metric. But I think a lot of times, especially for like the new age group athlete, or even it doesn't even matter, like the middle of the pack, front of the pack, like there's the amount of stuff that's out there to buy that you don't need heavily outweighs the stuff that you actually really truly need. The rest is just want, or you get FOMO from it. But yeah, I mean, I just think the least amount of, it's just like, an elimination diet almost. Like you can't just cut out 17 things and then, oh, well, this way you have to like understand what you're removing. So that means like the more things that you add in there, the more confusing it can get. And I just think like sometimes bearing it down to the bare bones, like you said, going out with just a chrono watch, just, listening to your body. You can still clock it, and you still probably know your run routes, or just listening to your breathing, right? Taking music away. Like those things are just, I think, especially as you kind of get in this time of year, if your race season's already done, you're looking at next year, is instead of going hard into the, some of the techie stuff, like go backwards and start working on like how to understand the feel for your body. Because right now is the time to do it when the weather's comfortable and the temps are, favorable, humidity dew points down. Like you really can get like a true baseline of what feels like what, and almost the most like, pleasurable, performance driven, or like, the best temperatures and the best environment for your best performance. Then you get a baseline, because then you know what cold and what hot feels like. It's hard to get a baseline in August when it's 110 degrees outside and the dew point 78. Like you can't really get a gauge of, because I do think like this time of year when you go out for a run, you're like, this is my zone 2, my zone 2 pace, effort, and feel gave me, this heart rate and this pace, and this is my feel for today. And it was perfect temperature. Maybe it's like 48 degrees, no humidity, no dew point. That's your baseline, like no extra energy towards keeping me hot, no extra energy on keeping me cool. This is it. And then every time you move up or down, it's a percentage cost on, on the environmental, or then you've got stress. So I know it's like there's too much out there. And the fact that, athletes that are self-coached, or even, coaches, right? They're trying to invent things to help you like farm all these different things, when I'm like, well, you don't really have to do that. You can just go back to the beginning. And for a lot of athletes who never started there, it would be a great place to go.
Man, I love that you brought up that 3-zone possibility, because, man, my whole thing with training used to be a lot more, and you resist. I find myself completely resisting a lot of technology, but it seeps in anyway. And then I find myself losing my way, because I used to do that. I would basically count, or I would, do all my training based on my breath. And I knew that, if I had a system, we've talked about it, but it was sort of like if I was breathing every 6, exhaling and inhaling every 6 strides on my run, that meant I was at all day pace or whatever. If it got to 4, that meant that it was, that was zone 3, I was pushing it, breathing hard. And then, it's like this, and then certain days can be different, right? Like you said, some days people aren't breathing well. And I like to think about that stuff too, as far as like how your lungs are recovering from the day before, with not only regard to working out, but maybe what you're eating. And, I have this weird thing about, I thought about it a long time ago. I don't know how accurate. It's just something I think about, is like, if I leave food on a plate and it dries, I kind of see how it dries. If it's a sludgy, like a cheese, and it melts and you can't get it off the plate, I'm like, man, maybe that stuff is like sludging up inside of me or whatever. It's kind of connecting to the lungs, so I some days we breathe. So that's why I'm so big into this deep breathing. I kind of try to get my lungs going. If I'm doing this stuff right, I'll do that before I run, just to kind of get my lungs up, and, before the race this weekend, just deep breathing before the swim to kind of get your lungs functioning right, or at least kind of warm. We talk about warming up the body or whatever, but do you warm up the lungs? Because some days that seems to go smoothly, and other days it's tricky, So, it's like, racing or running or training without a watch is very interesting, because then you really do kind of get back into, I train, there's a guy up here that he's just a beast. He's like, I don't race with power or heart rate or anything, because I just know what I have, and I just kind of push it in the race sometimes. And you know what you can handle, and when you understand what you can handle, then you're just more relaxed. I think that you look at, some days I'm trying to think, because I run and I kind of look at my pace a lot or whatever nowadays. And I think more times than not, I'm disappointed. You know what I mean? So sometimes I'm like, whoa, I'm flying today or whatever. But I'm just saying that gets in my head, and then you try to be somebody you're not, yeah, I don't know.
No, I mean, we know the answer before we look.
Yeah.
Sometimes we just don't like the answer, right? And we can tell that from our breathing, right? You go out and like for me, like earlier this week, it was like really, really pleasant to run outside, like the low humidity, low dew point, like 60s. I ran my Tuesday, Wednesday, and it was like perfect condition. So like my breathing was efficient. I mean, I was well rested. Everything pointed to like feeling good, and my breath was like easy, and I could feel my body, like I wasn't sweating a ton. Again, like all these things that we know can affect us, right? Like I'm getting these, and obviously heart rate was lower. Pace was pretty good for what I thought my effort would be. Went out yesterday morning for a short run, and I checked the temp before I went out. Higher humidity, a little bit warmer. After about 6 or 7 minutes, I had already sweat more than I did the 2 days combined. Mm-hmm. My breathing rate was a little bit, more, it was not rapid, but right. It was increased, and I knew that I wasn't moving as quick, just because you can tell when you're running, like how quick am I moving versus how quick am I not moving. I knew the answer before I even looked at my watch. Higher heart rate, slower pace. I knew it because of how slow I knew that I was moving, and then paying attention to the effects that my body was going under as it was operating at the speed that it was going at, right? So I was sweating more, my breath was more challenged, right, at that slower speed. And, I think I already said, like, but I was like sweating. I could feel it was humid outside. I could feel that breaths weren't nearly as, complete, right? Because there's more saturation in the air with the higher dew point. Like, I knew that these were more of a challenge. Plus, if you combine that with, like, already a restricted, breath, it's going to make it even more problematic, right? Because you have to get that in to then produce what you want to produce. And so I looked down and well, lo and behold, right? It was higher heart rate, slower pace. And it was like, none of it was news to me. It was all like, yeah, this is exactly how it felt. And you're like, well, then why do I need it to begin with? Why do I have to have that data? Like, oh, you got to have the data. You got to have the data to compare it to. And like sometimes it's nice to see trends over time, but
well, that's it too,
workout,
right? Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, because I think people are, including me, are overreactionary. Day to day, week to week. Trends over time. Yes. So I was just thinking about that. Is like, well, maybe we should just look at these numbers every month or something like that, just kind of same type of run, same type of run a month later, and then look at that. And then I was like, well, what if it's worse? Then you're going to really be jacked up. What I mean?
Well, I mean, like, to even take stuff like that, for example, right? Like, let's say you wore your heart rate monitor and you wore your watch, but you only went by time and you didn't look at any metrics at all, period. And you just did it and you saved it. And then every month, like, because even Strava does stuff like this, like, hey, your pace is faster than normal. But like, what if you had spent 3 weeks running up hills and then 4 weeks on a flat? You're like, oh, all of a sudden it's going to say, oh, your speed has increased. And you're like, well, I don't know if my speed has increased because now I run on flat versus hills. Maybe the hills made me faster. Maybe I am running faster. Like, to me, like the runs that always seem to give like the best feedback from athletes are like, hey, man, that was a great run. I went into my normal route and like I got back a little bit quicker, than I usually do. It's like little things like that like I think you see and you're like, oh, like that mile clicked off a little bit, or because it's like everyone runs at least some kind of the same route. You have to leave your house going one of like 2 or 3 directions max. So like I know like the 3 ways to get to the house. I know exactly like where I'm going to be. And if you know how you're moving and when you're getting, what kind of effort it is to get there. You're breathing in and out of your nose the whole time. Like, are you breathing in your nose, on your arm? Then maybe you need to slow it down a little bit. Like, I tell myself that too sometimes when I'm especially when I'm feeling good and I'm moving quickly. I think it's just kind of natural that you're like, well, if I'm breathing good and moving quickly, then I need to move more quickly, right? And I need to chase that labored feeling that I usually have that's equivalent to the pace that I'm giving. And that's not the case, right? The point is to keep it aerobic, in the nose, out the nose, even like, the shallowness of those breaths, or if it's like a power inhale and a power exhale, like, they could gauge things or gear things with that. But I mean, seriously, like, there's just so much, because and that's how I pace. Like, if you're doing testing or you're doing runs, like you have to breathe at a certain rate to be able to withstand a certain effort for a certain period of time. And so if you're labored breathing out, you're doing like a 20-minute bike test and you're labored in breathing at minute 4, you're not going to finish. Or your power is going to decrease so much that the test, data is going to be irrelevant. Like, you don't want your heart rate to go sky high, immediately. You want to gradually build and then hover. Like, and you should know what that feels like. I mean, people just don't know what that feels like. We've become so detached from that. So I think like adding these things in and just listening to them, and and yes, it is like it is environmental, it's terrain, it's stress, it's all these things that add up, but it tells the whole story, right? Of how, because it literally does tell you how hard your body is having to work to breathe. Is it working hard or is it working easy? And then what's the output that's generating? Is it higher than you expected or lower than you expected? And if it's lower than I expected, if it's taking me a lot of effort to do this, and maybe the best thing is just like take a long walk, instead of like even trying this. Or the same thing on the bike ride. Like, going up hills, like if you're breathing out of your mouth, you're probably going too hard. You should be bringing like deep breaths in and maybe some breaths out. Like that's to me, like that's just a really great way to understand like the amount of work that your body is in stress, right? Because the load is the workout, the effect that it has on you is like the stress. And I think that's like just a way to manage that, because we've already had that, right? You have a little bit of extra cup of coffee because you didn't get enough sleep, and you go out and you run, your heart rate's high and your breathing's messed up. You're like, and my pace is over. You're like, God, I'm getting, unfit. You're total prisoner. I'm like, no, you're not. That's what your body is today. And yes, you can definitely see trends over time if you're being consistent, but those are three really great, zones, if you will, to gauge. And yeah, would be some overlap always, but it's a very easy way to help meter, or put the governor on the efforts you're doing, right? In the, in especially in the bike and run, you can't do it in the pool, but like on your bike and your run, like how easy it is, for me to do these things and these efforts. Like if you're going to hop on and do these tests, especially if they're sustained efforts, and even things like 70.3 and Ironman, you're like, don't ask yourself necessarily, like, can I hold this pace or this, power, but like, is this how I know I'm going to feel comfortable breathing for X amount of time? And is how I'm breathing, is it sending signal to the body that I know that I'm utilizing what I want to utilize? Like if I'm on the bike ride of an Ironman, I'm done Wisconsin, I've done the stick, I'm heading the first loop, and I'm already breathing in and out of my mouth the whole time. Like I know that I'm just like rolling through the carbohydrates and I'm just burning through my glycogen scores. I don't need my power meter to tell me that. I don't need my heart meter. I can just tell because of how I'm breathing. I am anaerobic. I'm more without oxygen. So I know when I'm burning more. If I'm breathing in out of my nose, I'm, at least if you've done like, realistic training with a lot of aerobic work, you're probably oxidizing way more fat, which is a good thing, which is what you want to do. So you can save, the glycogen, just keep it topped off with all with the carbs you're having, into race. Like it's all like very simple, but we get so enamored with the stuff that our watch tells us, but you see it spectating every race. How many mistakes can we make all the time with the amount of information that we have, and still continuously, pace things horribly and end up cramping and having a DNF? How many times do we have to have GI distress and throw up, if there's that much information? Like if there's that much stuff out there and we all have access to it, then we should all be borderline racing perfect. Yeah. But that's not the case. I genuinely think people are failing more, not because of their true innate ability that they were given or their work, but it's more so their dependence on a misguided plan or expectation or number that they attach themselves to from a device made 8,000 miles away.
Mm. Yeah. As you're talking, I was thinking one of the hardest parts of this sport is what I would call like sort of imperceptible improvement or change. And we all kind of get trapped in this idea of like, okay, I ran this last week and now this week I should be a lot better or what, and if that run or whatever doesn't hit like you hope it does, you think you're not improving or whatever like that. I was telling you beforehand, I listened to an interview with that guy who won my age group at 10-16 as a 64-year-old guy. And he said a lot of things that were, he trains quite a bit. But one of the things he said was, I really honestly start training for my A race a year ahead of it. And that really kind of resonated with me because I think back to some of and we talk about it all the time, right, is, consistency is king. And I do think it's real easy to sort of have your A race and then just fade away for 3 months or something like that and then come back and, And he even said, he goes, you can kind of do races and have a fairly good day by not training for a long time or whatever and kind of get the job done. But he goes, if you're trying to be at your best, you really have to sort of be, focused out a year. At least that's his opinion. And I kind of agree with it in the sense of like, you don't have to hammer it. But like for me, I'm real consistent at doing a race and then just falling off the planet, for a while. And I think a little bit of that is great, but I I do want to be a little more consistent this fall, and I think it's just, to me, we talk about that. Races are won in the fall and the winter because you're just sort of keeping your baseline up. And think about the day that we just had at Wisconsin. What a training day that is, and to let all that kind of fade away is just it's kind of a sad thing to think about it, because it's any race that we talk about, you have a really, it should be a big fitness boost in a sense, and to not capitalize on that, I think, is the crime in the sport a lot of times. And that's one of my missions, is because I know in the past where I haven't really been trying to, it's kind of like cramming for a test. If you're studying ahead of time all the time, you just have a really good grasp of it, and you know that you're retaining things. And here we are trying to cram every season, sometimes a little bit more than others or whatever. And sometimes it works out if you're mentally in a spot. But I think ultimately, if you really, truly want to kind of be at your best, is when you're going through this whole season and you're not really seeing craziness. It's just this sort of like slow rolling improvements that maybe aren't even perceptible all the time, but it's just the subtle things. Like you said, man, I feel better at this point in my run than I usually do. And how do you quantify that? It's just very difficult sometimes, but going into it, midway through the season, like you're just a lot more confident in the fact that you're going to go out and get to that point. And it's maybe doesn't always happen, but when you get there and you feel stronger and you know that you can finish it without a problem versus, finishing it with a lot of a strain and effort, those are the things that I just think are hard to remember and keep an eye on, because it's such a gradual growth. If you do it right, you just kind of keep getting a little bit better and a little bit better. And it's very hard to see because you didn't really necessarily improve from the last 2 weeks or whatever, but over the last 8 months, it's really noticeable if you can kind of, reflect on it and see it that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you do all this work and you do so much of it under load, then that's when you show up and have a really good race, right? Because you're no longer under load. And I think that's like part of the over analysis that a lot of athletes do, is they get so busy, caught up in analyzing a single session, or even like the same session, maybe 2 weeks in a row, because a lot of times, like, even if you're the same or a little bit, not worse, but a little bit slower, like if you've done it under fatigue, then it's the same or even better. But then also, like, what was the conditions? But like, what was your preparation? Like, we expect perfection out of these devices and these analysis tools and AI. Like, we expect perfection all the time, right? But the input, it's like, having a conversation earlier this week with them, like, hey, what are these CTL, ATL, TSS scores mean in training? It's like, well, basically nothing. I haven't used those for like 8 years, and I find them like borderline useless. But I was like, the mistake people make is that you put all your weight into a perfect output, and then you half-ass every single input. So if you're not always on it and the right type of comparison, then your output and your analysis of that trend is incorrect. It's based off your inconsistency to be like, and I think that's why so many people get led astray on race day, is they have no idea what they're looking at. They really don't. They look at an assumption, right? So let me give you an example. Let's say you're leading into your last training block and you do 3 rides that are, somewhat the same, 3 consecutive Saturdays. They're all 3.5 hours long, and they've got the same interval structure and everything. And you come out of the gate and you do your first one on a Saturday, and it yields we'll just equate like a 200 normalized power, and you felt really, really good. And then the next week you do the same thing, and it's about 2 watts lower. And then the third week you do another one, and it's like 10 watts higher. You're like, well, now which one's the best? Mm-hmm. And the question is, I love everyone like gives me shit for this, but like, it depends. So then you got to go back and look. All right, well, what were the conditions, right? So if the conditions were really, really hot on, the one with the highest output, then yeah, that's for sure the best, one of the best ones. But what if you had taken 2 days off beforehand, you didn't do shit because you got lazy. You came in with fresh legs and you busted one out. And then you were completely shelled the next day and you put out a shit run. Was it still the best? I'd argue no. Right. So there's so many things you have to take into account. What was the weather like? What was the humidity? What was your sleep like the day before? What was the stress like? Were you consistent that whole week? Did you nail every workout that week? Or did you have a few days where you aimed low and you came in like overly fresh, right? Did you come in more stressed with more load and then still nail it? And then also nail the workout Sunday and then had a first couple good days at the start of the week? That tells the story. Like you always have to look at least a 5-day start to finish gap to straddle a workout. And most people they don't do any of that. They take they don't know or remember how they slept. They don't know if they ate well and ate, they know what the Fuel In Lab, app tells them, but they don't have any idea if they ate well and hydrated enough. And did they have Mexican that day, or did they eat clean and set themselves up for success? Did they underfuel during the ride or overfuel or no fuel? They don't know. How many calories take in? They don't know. What was the next day like? What was like all these things? Did you recover well? And if you did have a really great ride, did you spend the rest of the day with your feet popped up watching college football in your Normatec boots and your Theragun by your side with with some Element hydration? Or did you do your bike ride and then do 8 hours of yard work in the 110-degree heat, dehydrated and got the next day and then ran? So what was better? Like there's so many things that literally very, if any, athletes ever pay attention to. But yet they use these outputs that they see as the one all be all, and then they spit it in, to this, algorithm, or they let an algorithm spit out to them all of these inconsistencies, and then they expect all these inconsistencies to lead up to a consistent value that is going to then guide their one single day. And they throw caution to the wind. They don't pay attention to how they feel. They don't listen to their body. They just, this is it. Like that's what the data says. And yeah, like some of the information is important, but if you don't know how to filter it and you don't know how to be objective, you don't know, again, like let's get off the pendulum swinging here. It's never really great and it's never really the worst. It kind of is what it is. Because honestly, like a lot of your medium average paced sessions are probably arguably some of your best. Like to me, sessions should never, I mean, it's funny, like they ask us to give session RPE immediately after the ride or the run or the swim. But sometimes, like, I honestly think the next morning is probably the better indicator. Like, because if you feel positive about it, right, did it come out with a fast result? You're already skewed. Like if you go out and you a 30-minute run and it's the first weather perfect day, right? You're going to go out there and be like, oh, this felt great. Like my pace was awesome. And you may have overran. But you score it low on RPE and then it felt great. So your coach is like, oh, low RPE felt great. Hell yeah, baby. And then you wake up the next day and your legs are like bricks because you overran. Well, now where are we? And like that stuff happens every single session, every single week. And then you're like, okay, well, then maybe you might be sitting there listening and thinking like, okay, well, then what the fuck is all this stuff good for? I'm like, it's good sometimes. Like it's good if you know how to use it, but most athletes have no idea how to use any of it. And honestly, to be frank, like most coaches don't have any idea how to utilize that stuff for good, or more importantly, they don't know what to completely filter out to leave like the raw material, because the raw material always should be what the athletes like text said, like how they explained that it felt. And it might also be incorrect or correct, but those like the little things that you pay attention to. And that's why it's so important to get this, because that it covers a lot of different things. It covers things that you can't read. It's not, and I know it makes, probably coaches feel smarter and more, professional, talk so much about data and charts and this is how we do things. I'm like, that stuff, it really goes out the fucking window for a lot of people. I mean, on race day. And if you depend on that stuff way too much, it gets in your head. I mean, it completely gets in your head. But the amount of input, and then if you're off, like, what are you going to do? Like, I had an athlete ask me this on like the day before Wisconsin. he was doing Ironman Wisconsin, and I was then expecting the 7.3. He's like, hey, do you ever give out like time goals? And I said, absolutely not. I was like, why? Why would you? Because my shot in the dark, even though I'm feeling pretty confident, I like kind of have a range. There, it's a negative, because you're going to see it and either going to have way too like the high expectations of meeting it, and if you don't meet it, you're going to think that you're failing, and maybe you're not failing. Maybe my guess was just that off base, or you're going to feel so good in I was way off base, but you're 20 minutes faster, but you're going to meter yourself because you're like, if coach can think as fast, then I can't go as fast.
Right.
Like the athlete has to believe, the athlete has to listen. Like, you're responsible for all these things. Yeah, we can help you make some, some decisions, but again, just be careful, like that, all these different, and again, it's like, it's largely extra items to sell, and I love experimenting and I love exploring, like things that are out there to see if there's, any real merit behind a lot of stuff. And I still like it. I mean, honestly, if you had to give me a choice of like what device to keep over the last decade in coaching, of all the things that I've bought and tried and sampled, it'd be the heart rate monitor, chest strap. Like, if I had to choose to keep, I'd keep it over a power meter any day of the week, because I just think across the sports, like, that is such a, like, listening to your breath and your heart rate. Because to me, that's the truest signal of your body's overall stress and strain, which should tell you how long it can handle the amount of that for the duration that you're going. And again, the more you add, the more confusing. It's just like, it's like scrolling through social media, right? You get 19 different articles and news links. They all say different things. It's all based on what their own agenda is, and then everybody gets confused, and so no one believes anything.
I'm so with that. There's been times I like what you said, because you never know like what happened a few days before, how'd you eat, how'd you sleep, all these kind of, but like, sometimes I'll get into Training Peaks on a Monday and kind of be going back through the weekend, and someone will have a long run on a Sunday, and I'll read the comment, and it's like, worst run ever. I felt terrible. I feel like shit. My legs are just done, or toast, whatever. And then it would be, they'll have a run on Monday. It's 45-minute run or something. I'll be like, oh shit, here we go. And I'll go click it, and they did it, and they're like, unbelievable. I felt amazing today.
Right.
So it's like, how do you, how do you deal, like, one of the things I always try to do as an athlete, and I impart as a coach, is that, because we said some workouts just go up and down, and there's really there's probably a reason, but sometimes they're just very difficult to figure out. It just could be a whole slew of things, what's in your head and whatever. So one of my sort of training philosophies for me personally, and I like to try to get to my athletes, is like, if they have a good day, like an unbelievable run or something, I'm like, lock that in your vault, that feeling, whatever that is, just keep that. And if they have a shitty day, I'm kind of like, just let it go. It's sort of like throw it out, like they say that a lot in college football or college basketball or something. If you have just a complete clunker right in the middle of the season, it's just like, don't even watch the film, throw it away. It's just not real, So and then that's just sort of a psychological approach I take. I like to really, it's not easy because it's hard to let go of, man, you're right in the middle of the season, everything's going great, and then you have a terrible workout. Why'd that happen? It's probably not a true reflection, right? And maybe that great run or great ride isn't a true reflection either, but I'd certainly rather remember that and have that sort of influence my spirit and mentality than be like lurking into a bad workout. I'm going to fail. No, so much of this racing stuff is just kind of believing, and keeping your mind in the right place and being positive about it, because, Ironman race, we talked about it. I mean, there's a million emotions that happen throughout the day. So how are you going to handle that low part? It's to me, it always comes back to, no, this isn't who I am. I still got something in me, and I just got to figure it out. And figuring it out is, a big part of training. You go through those patches, and I talked about it, but pretty much all my training this year was like, all right, I don't necessarily feel great out here, but how can I make this feel better, feel easier, get through it? And I feel like that's exactly what I did all day on Sunday was, the ups and downs of things. And just, like I said, I knew my legs might not be able to hang for the whole race. So I kind of just dropped in my little ring and I was going to play that out. And I was like, this feels okay. I'm going to just do this. I'm fine with that. So it was, sometimes you can force through stuff, or other times you can adjust and make things feel easier. I like the idea of making everything feel easy, and that might sound ridiculous, but if you learn how to do that, especially in a sport like this, an Ironman and long distance stuff, I mean, that's really a great skill to have. Is like if you're struggling and you can make something feel easier, at least to even get through a dark patch. You know what I mean? Like there's segments out there where you can't necessarily force your way through it, but if you understand how to adjust and make, work your form a little bit better and just kind of concentrate on something that's just better for your body at that moment, things can change and you might have a little more energy later, whether it's by fueling or just the grace of God. It's sort of like things happen out there. So I don't know. I just think it's really intriguing to figure out ways to handle situations all the time. Like if I go into a dark place, I'm just like, all right, this is good. How am I going to get through this? And it's always practice. It's always training.
Yeah, I think, I love what you said about making things easy. And I think that is honestly one of the more difficult pieces on both the coach and the athlete, because athletes that are fairly new to the sport, or just depending on like what generation, they come from, is, you got to go hard to be all the time to be really, really fast. You always have to go hard. And then coach is like, well, like you give somebody like a whole week of aerobic work and they're like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this isn't training. And you're like, but it is, like going way back to, I remember listening to, it was a really like an amazing interview with Phil Maffetone and his time with Mark Allen, who only has 6 Kona World Championships. It was completely dominant. And they talked about he had never beaten Dave Scott in a 70.3, like at that point, or the full for that matter. And he started working with Phil Maffetone, who's like, not the godfather, but yeah, pretty much of like, the 180 minus your age plus a little bit, but just are lots of aerobic training. Cause largely what we do is aerobic. And when they started working together, Phil Maffetone and Mark Allen, they started working together, and he said, well, we're going to do 6 months of only aerobic work. That's it. 6 months, all aerobic. And you're thinking, good God, most athletes couldn't last 6 days. And then he goes out and he enters a 70.3 over in Taiwan or China, I think, and absolutely destroys Dave Scott for the first time. And obviously there's a lot that can go into that, but a lot of it was due to the fact that he had changed. He was training so much and so hard all the time that he was never able to completely perform at his highest. And I really do. I think a lot of athletes continuously overtrain and rest too little, because we are, it's odd, right? Because if you think about all the traps that there are now out there for athletes to trip over in their journey to being the most successful and healthiest version of themselves, right? Like, I was even listening to a podcast yesterday interviewing a pro cyclist, and he legit said, yeah, I know this is the exact words out of his mouth. I know that this way of living isn't the healthiest long term, but I'm going to do it for 10 years because that's what high performance is all about. Right. And like it's not sustainable or good for you. And we're age groupers. We do this for health, right? For longevity. But again, like going back to all the like the landmines that we see as age group athletes. You've got, the constant, need or feel to like put your stuff on Strava or put your stuff on social media, and then to see how much faster you are. And then you got Training Peaks, you've got whatever digital platform you use to log your stuff in, and how much faster is it? Or now my trends are getting faster, and maybe my trends are getting slower. This is faster than this is more mileage. It's like constant better, worse, better, worse, better, worse, better, worse. That's really all it shows you. And then you're like, oh, I got to go harder. I got to do more. Like, I've never heard an athlete be like, yeah, you know what I think? I think we should do a little bit less and maybe go a little bit easier. Like, legit, I've never heard that come out of an athlete's mouth. Like, you have to figure that on your own, because they're like, give me more. I can handle more. I need to do this more. And like, there's all these signs that like you get sick a lot, tone it down. Like you get burnt out a lot, tone it down. You get niggles a lot, tone it down. Like, but that's not the society that we've created, the culture we've created in endurance sports. It's always like, go one more rep or go one more interval. I got to go higher. I got to go above what's required. Or who needs active recovery? Like, I want to smash it today. Or I'm like, that's not like everything we do from sprint distance to full distance is aerobic work, largely. Like, the more you can train easy, the better. I mean, I'd be hard pressed to find an athlete that if we said, all right, for the next month, right, and you're swimming, just swim easy, like the slowest you can swim. And then, those 4 weeks, I want you to do all your training in and out of your nose. I'd be willing to bet there would be like, they're not getting sick. They're not getting hurt. They're probably sleeping better. They're probably feeling better. And you're like, but aren't we supposed to be in pain? But aren't we supposed to be like not be able to walk? Or like, I threw up on my trainer mat today. That workout was epic. Like, well, no, that workout was probably stupid. Like, if that's the amount of stress you put on your body during one workout, then the next 3 days are going to be like nothing. Like, and that's aerobic work. That's in and out through the nose. Like, that's just, again, like, you don't have to track it. You can just be easy. And sometimes you just need a little push that direction. But again, like, if you're heading the off season, you've done like this big aerobic block, in your training with an Ironman, you just had that, like, again, like, don't jump back in, try to do the same thing, but don't let it go to waste either, because it is like, you can't go back, and you have to have a period of unloading and deloading from a huge, not just the race itself, right? But the training block leading into it. You have to let that come down, right? You have to let that curve come down and unload and unstress, the body, so then you can withstand another, jump in training eventually. But doesn't mean you let it all go away. It doesn't mean you go back out and hit it again, which is a huge trap people fall into, especially if they have a good race or a bad race, is they want either revenge because they had a bad race, or they want to raise their game a different level. And it's so conflicting, right? Because you want revenge, or you want to raise your game to a different level, and your coach, if it's smart, is like, yeah, but not right now, right? Like, just a little bit, but we don't need to go full bore. Like, we need to just be intelligent and free and work on, some of the systems that we need to work on, like going, long term. Like, we always, that Mark Phillips, he even mentioned in his like post race email, like, he had his best open marathon and Ironman. He was like, we do the run program every year where athletes, not every athlete, but a lot of we just run a shit ton. And he was like, I don't know that I've seen, and it's all aerobic, all of it. And he said, I don't know that I've seen like any massive speed gains from it. Like, I'm never going to run a sub 17-minute 5K again, but the results over the 2 years, not last month, 2 years, are proven that my run is more durable and more efficient than ever. But the fact that he even had years on the end of that is going to make most triathletes tune out. Like, I don't have time for that. I need the 8 weeks to Ironman PR plan, right? Or I can do speed work for 4 weeks and see like an initial, like a really good improvement, and then completely have my system wrecked for the rest of the year and wonder, well, how I got here. It takes time. It takes years for some people, but that's also how it sticks. Like, it's not going to go away overnight. You do short stimulus and you cram yourself hard. Yeah, you might get like a quick, good result and then be tricked into thinking this is the way, but then you're going to be stale and, stagnant in your performance gains for probably the foreseeable future. But those aerobic gains, they are the cool thing is like they're really hard to get because you have to be patient and consistent, but then they stick with you. It's like riding a bike, And so I think like the more you can do that, the more, listening to your body, listening to your breath, like that's all like that's the fun part of the quote unquote, Q4 and off season if your racing is done is starting to go out and do some of these things. And again, like don't be worried about your watch when you're out there on the kayak, or don't go, I'm biking up at the grocery store with Hayden. Like I don't need to take my bike computer with me. Like I'm going to be going slow as hell anyway because it takes them forever to get up some of these hills. But I just need to know that I did it and I had fun. It's like you don't need to track everything. Yeah, I just think there's way more value sometimes in like if I asked Mike to train for 4 weeks with just a heart rate monitor and be consistent, it'd be a lot easier to analyze his progress than the next person who might have a Stride foot pod and a power meter and a GPS watch and, like 16 different sets of like, carbon shoes, which again is a whole nother input that people fuck up all the time. They don't wear their super shoes on one run, then they wear it on another one. You don't think there's a huge difference in that, but yet we don't have time for that, right? You don't have time for that to look to see if that was really better, or you get a massive tailwind or no wind one day and you're riding your miles per hour is like incredible, and the next week it's lower, but you don't mark that there was insane wind or torrential downpour and you can't remember because it was 4 weeks ago, or was that? I mean, this is just it's so silly. Like even like I said about the super shoes, how much difference that makes in some people's freshness and how much fast they can run. Same thing with like some people don't even pump their tires up on their bike every single time they go ride at the exact same PSI. Like you don't think that makes a difference? It does. Like it's just, again, but all that stuff's going into the same algorithm, computing out and giving you the information that you feel like is biblical. And it's just, I'm just telling you right now, it's not.
Yeah. I mean, this is an interesting year for me. I basically erred on the side of aerobic base training the whole time. And I ended up having a decent, but the one thing I knew when is it gave me what I needed, but now I'm kind of like, okay, I feel like I've done this for a long time. And now I feel pretty good about the idea of trying to, push my ceiling on the bike a little bit this fall, so that's kind of where I'm at right now because I feel strong enough and, I feel like I do have a really good base for that. And, this is where I'm at. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with it. That just felt right for me this year. And I've put together a string and I'm not really good at putting together like full long strings, but this is the time to really kind of capitalize. So yeah, it's really interesting, man.
I love it. Well, I'm going to give my quick picks for the Ironman World Championships this weekend. I'm going to go top 3, and that's it. And this may shock a few people. I'm actually going to go Sam Laidlow for the win. I'm going to go Gustav Eden for second place, followed by Patrick Lange. I have them. I don't have Detlev or Von Berg or Blumenfeld in my top 3. I think Gustav Eden is back, and a lot of you may not even know or have forgotten this is the course where he burst onto the scene in I think 2018 or 19, winning the 70.3 World Championships on the Nice course on a road bike with like no sponsors. And I think he is back, and I think this course suits him well. I think Laidlow is too much of a gamer, and he knows this course, and he will just full send the downhills. And then I think Lange is probably the same. And then I think it's a runner's course, and I think they're going to take the top 3 again. I wouldn't be shocked if Blumenfeld won by like 30 minutes either. I just don't. I don't think he's got it in him this year.
Okay, I'm rolling with that, man.
Rolling with it. I love it. Well, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com, is our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you are finishing off your year, and looking to make a difference in your training and how you approach it, or even just your performance for next year, in your races, or even just the remaining race you have this year, check out the coaches tab. We got a lot of great coaches on there. That would be, probably a great fit for all. And check those out and be happy to help you along that journey. As always, Mike's available, Mike at c26triathlon.com. Or if you need anything from me, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, man. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, dude. See you, dude.